Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Allison and this is episode 6 of my knitting podcast. I'll be totally honest, I filmed about 10 minutes of this video without my microphone before remembering I have them now. So this is take 2 of the start of this video. But I feel like it's been quite a while since I've been on here to discuss my whips, my finished objects, and my acquisitions and plans. So I definitely have quite a bit to go over today, which is pretty exciting. I just haven't had the motivation necessarily to film in the last few weeks. As you might be able to tell with the ever-changing lighting in this video, I'm sure, we've just been having insane weather, and that's coming from a Canadian who has grown up and lived in Montreal my entire life. This is probably one of the worst winter storms that I can remember in my lifetime, at least. We got about 30 centimeters of snow last week, and then yesterday, before the city had the chance to remove any of the snow from a couple days prior, we got 30 to 40 more centimeters. So I definitely got stuck trying to park my car yesterday, coming home from a few errands in the morning, and had to park across the street at the grocery store because my current parking space is just a huge amount of snow. I will say I love my Nissan Sentra, but definitely not the most practical for the winter in Canada. Thankfully, my husband has a Subaru Outback, so that is primarily what we use throughout the winter and stormy days like this one. But all that to say, I've had a lot of motivation to stay inside and knit, and maybe not so much to actually get on here and film and talk about my knits. The seasons definitely do have an effect on my mood, so I think my mental health has been a little bit up and down over the last few weeks, and I never want to come on and film a video just for the sake of getting something up on YouTube. I want to do this when I am feeling inspired to do so. So all that to say, it's been freezing. I've been inside knitting quite a bit. I just haven't been sharing. So I do have quite a few projects to share today that I am actually really eager to get off the needles and wear because it's been so cold. I will touch quickly on what I am wearing. I'm sure everyone knows this pattern at this point, but this is the Ingrid sweater by PetiteKnit. I knitted this up shortly after the pattern was released. I want to say it was 2 years ago in January, February of 2023. I knitted this up on Knit Picks Swish, which is a superwash yarn. So very, very soft, but also pills quite a bit. I've mentioned in the past, this is my favorite yarn for gift knitting and accessory knitting because it is so soft. You can almost guarantee that whoever you're making something for will be able to tolerate this merino because it's so soft. This is one of those sweaters that I love and am extremely proud of, just the amount of detail. This was the first time I had ever done kind of an all-over textured garment like this, but is one that I definitely plan on re-knitting maybe soon, hopefully this year even, because for whatever reason I knit this up at a DK gauge. This is the Swish DK from Knit Picks, and the sweater calls for a worsted gauge. So the sleeves are definitely shorter than I would prefer. The overall fit is just a little bit smaller than I'd like. I intentionally knitted it cropped, but it does fit a little closer to the body than I think I would like. All that said, I do still wear this quite a bit. It is one of my favorite sweaters. I just know that when I see all these other knitters on YouTube and Instagram in their oversized, cozy Ingrids, I definitely wish that I had one that looked like that as well. So it's on the list. I'm not going to unravel this one ever. I love it too much, but it's definitely a plan for the distant future, I'll say. Diving into my finished objects, I actually only have one for this month, but it's not something that has been on the podcast before because I knit these up in 5 days. So these are my penny gloves by PetiteKnit. They are not looking the cleanest right now because I have worn them quite a few times already. I will say, with the insane snow and extreme cold temperatures that we've been having over the last couple weeks, these have not gotten the most use. They're definitely not super practical for this kind of intense winter storm. But I just know that as we get toward the end of the summer and things hopefully start to warm up a little bit, these will definitely be in the rotation. So this was my second time knitting up this pattern. The first time I knitted them up as a gift for a friend in actually the exact same yarn I'm wearing now, the same color, the same weight, everything. And I loved them, but I never ended up knitting up a pair for some reason until now. So I've mentioned in a couple videos that I was really looking to make a set of penny gloves and also a matching hood or balaclava. I was in Boston for the weekend last month at the end of January, and I stopped at a yarn store in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Gather Here. And I was looking around this store to try and find sport weight and also a mohair that would go with it that I could hold together to make a hood that would match whatever sport weight yarn I chose to knit up my penny gloves. When we were there, I saw this yarn that my husband actually found, fell in love with it, and they didn't have enough to get to make a matching hood, but because I loved it so much, I decided to just go ahead and get it and make the penny gloves anyway. So all that said, I ended up getting 2 skeins of that yarn, and I used up less than one to make 2 penny gloves. So I do have quite a bit of it left. Not enough to make a hood or balaclava, I would say. Probably not even enough to make a hat with a double folded brim, but I could definitely get a headband out of it. So I think that's the plan right now. I love a matching winter accessories set, and for the number of times that I have my hair tied up and can't really wear a hat over it, I think it would definitely be beneficial for me to have another winter headband in my rotation. I could even go on runs with it once I start running outside again. I've definitely been living on the treadmill over the last few months. But it'll just be a versatile piece that I can have that will also match with these gloves. I'll actually throw in some photos that I took the other day in these gloves with my camel coat, which is the one that I would primarily be pairing these with. I think it looks really good with that coat, so I am really excited with how they turned out. This yarn is the Road to China Light by the Fibre company in the color Garnet. And it's a blend of 4 different types of fibers. So if I remember correctly, it is alpaca, silk, camel, and cashmere. And I will put down below what the breakdown is of those fibers because I do not remember off the top of my head. But as you can imagine, with that kind of fiber combination, these are extremely soft, the perfect yarn to have in contact with your hands, I would say, because these are not even remotely itchy, super comfortable, and yeah, just really, really soft. And I'm super, super happy with my yarn choice. The whole knitting process for these was fairly uneventful. Like I said, it only took 5 days to knit these up. I think I did actually bind off one of the thumbs a little tighter than the other because one of them fits just a little bit more snug. But even with a couple wears, that has stretched out a little bit, so it's not something that bothers me enough to go in and redo it. Something that does bother me enough to go in and redo it at some point is this little bit right here. You can see this is basically, you finish with a round of purl stitches and then you bind off in just regular knit. And of course, you're going to have the little jog between the start of the round and the end of the round where there's not really going to be a purl bump. So to weave in this end, I just kind of wove it in through the beginning here where the start of the round was to sort of make it look seamless. And then I cut my yarn and went on my way. But I don't think I weaved it in quite enough because it did eventually come undone and poke out. And then because it was poking out and bothering me, I just snipped the end instead of trying to weave it back in because it was too short. And so now I don't have enough of an end here left to weave this back in and connect. And so I have this little bump here, which is ultimately not the end of the world, but because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my knitting, whenever I look down and see that, it does bother me. So that would be something that I think I will probably go in at some point soon to fix. Just pick up the last round of knit that I have here, pick back the bind off or cut off the bind off, and then just re-bind off, re-knit that purl row and re-bind off, and make sure that I've really woven in my end long enough so that if it does come unraveled, I can weave it back in. I don't seem to have the same problem with this one, which is great. I think I just, yeah, don't know what I was thinking when I cut this a little bit too short to be able to weave back in afterwards. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about the penny gloves. I know many people have knit up this pattern. Very simple fingerless glove pattern, great beginner pattern. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And I'm looking forward to actually getting some more wear out of these. My first work in progress today is definitely my most active work in progress, I would say. This is the knit I've been most excited about over the last few weeks, and it has been on the podcast before. This is my Stornoway sweater by Coco Amore Knit. I am almost done the body. I'm on the last contrast color row here, and then I think there's only a few more rows in pattern before the ribbing begins. And then I will go on to do the collar and sleeves. This is being knit up in one of my favorite yarns, I'll say, to work with, which is the Wool of the Andes worsted from Knit Picks. I've made one other project before in this yarn. It was my Lumi pullover from not too long ago, a couple months back. And it was also knit in two colors of Wool of the Andes worsted, but at a fairly tighter gauge than this one. I believe the main body of that sweater was knit up on a 4.5 millimeter needle, while this one is being knit up on a 5, which shouldn't make a huge difference, but I definitely notice this one to be a lot drapier than my Lumi. My Lumi is definitely a bit more dense. The stitches just being a little bit tighter and making a thicker fabric, which is perfectly fine. It's a winter Christmas sweater, that's the intention. But I am really loving the loose drape of the yarn in this pattern. Oh, and I forgot to mention the colors. So this gray main color here is Dove Heather, and the green here is Noble Heather. And I think they look really good together. So the reason this has so much nice drape right now is actually because I did a mid-project block. I blocked it, I want to say right around here, just after these rows of purl. From here upward was blocked, just because I wanted to get a sense of what the length was looking like. I wish I had taken some before photos, but you might remember from my last podcast episode, before I had actually joined under the arms for this, that due to the nature of the stitch repeat here in the pattern, it does get very scrunched up. So because there are rows of purl and some knit stitches in between, it causes it to roll in like this. And so it is a little bit difficult when it's on the needles to get a sense of what the length is without stretching it. So before adding any more length and risking making it too long, I definitely wanted to give it just a quick block and see sort of where we were at with the length. I know that the designer, I believe, had 6 rows from under the neckline to the bottom of this contrast color. So I was assuming that I still had one more row to go, but just to be on the safe side, I did block it. And I was right, it was still a little bit short, so I decided to do one more repeat of the pattern before starting the ribbing at the bottom. I do typically gravitate more toward cropped sweaters and will crop many of the sweaters that I knit even shorter than the designer usually suggests. But in the case of this one, I did really want to have an oversized, cozy sweater. I don't actually have any very oversized crew neck sweaters that I've knit myself yet. The only other really oversized sweater I have is my Harlow sweater V-neck, which I love and I wear the crap out of, especially over the last few weeks. So I think it's definitely going to be nice to have another very oversized sweater in my rotation. And so I wanted to make sure that it was actually going to be long enough that it didn't look silly, because I did knit also one size up from my recommended size. So had I cropped the body, I think it would have just looked very, very boxy. It would have been wide and not too long. It would have essentially looked like a square. So I think one more repeat at the bottom is definitely wise, and we'll probably get the exact length that I'm going for. So I am really, really excited to keep chugging away at this. I've mentioned in the past, but I am knitting this as part of the Stornoway Sweater Squad knit along with Casey from Young Folk Knits and Rachel and Jessica from Those Twins Who Knit. I had always had this pattern kind of in the back of my mind, but it wasn't in my immediate plans at all. But when I saw that this knit along was happening and I had the right yarn quantities for it, I thought, it was meant to be. And I am really happy with this decision. I think I was definitely missing something like this in my wardrobe. I have not very often knit up stripes before, so this is not new for me. I've knit stripes a lot, but I haven't knit many stripes for myself. So it'll definitely be something new and fun to have in my wardrobe. That'll be a little bit different from anything else I've ever knitted, which is really exciting. In my last podcast episode, I had mentioned how I was a little bit frustrated or a little bit shocked, I guess, at the number of ends that you create while knitting up the yoke. I did actually go in and weave in quite a few of them. There are still some hanging out here, but there were definitely way more. Of course, one of the main reasons for that was that these contrast color stripes here are knit in an odd number. So you are starting the yarn on one end and finishing it on the other. And so when you're knitting flat, it's not possible to carry the yarn down. So you have to cut it every time while rejoining it. So for each color change, there are 2 more ends to weave in. And it was definitely getting very end heavy up here. I mean, you can kind of tell here I still have quite a bit of fringe. But now that I am in the round, have joined under the underarms, I can just carry my yarn down from one stripe to the next. So let me just show what that looks like here. Where is my beginning of round? Jeez. There we go. So when I am not using one of the colors, I just let it hang there and I catch it kind of like you're catching a float when you're doing color work. Catch it with the other color and then continue. And then when you come back to using the next color, just make sure that this is not pulled too tight and isn't having your row buckle like that. I don't know if that explanation made any sense, but this has been saving me from having any more ends to weave in, as well as the fact that I am spit splicing this yarn because it is a 100% wool. So instead of attaching a new ball and having those ends hanging there, I use the spit splice method to attach my balls. And this is my second time using it. I will use it whenever I can because it is seriously a life changer. Not having to weave in any ends on my Lumi was just amazing. So I will continue to use that as long as I can. But yeah, that is basically all I have to say about my Stornoway at this point. I am also definitely glad that I blocked it so that I can get a sense of how long the sleeves should be as well, which I'm sure I will have to block before I end up doing the ribbing on those too, but I will update you all on the process. This has been definitely my primary knit over the last few weeks, so I anticipate being finished with this hopefully by the end of February, if not by March 13th or March 15th, which is the end date of the cal. I think it would be really cool to have it finished by that date. So I will keep chugging along on this and provide any updates when I have them. Now the sun is coming out, which is actually nice because I haven't seen the sun in a long time, but it's getting real bright in here because there's just tons of snow outside that it's reflecting off of. So excuse the lighting changes. It is what it is. It's winter. This next whip is one that will be familiar to viewers of my podcast, and that is my Monday sweater by PetiteKnit. Yeah, it's not looking all that different from the last time I showed it. The main difference here being that I actually finished the first sleeve. So I think the last time I updated, I was maybe around here. And now I, spent a couple hours this weekend being disciplined, sat down and finished knitting that sleeve. So all that's left to do now is the left sleeve, and then I will be done. So we're getting there, we're getting there. It's going to be very warm and cozy. It's super soft. It is, as I've mentioned, the main yarn that I am using is Twill from Knit Picks, which is a fingering weight 100% superwash merino. And I'm holding it with the Woolberry Fibre Co. Berry Suri in the colorway Flock, which is a beautiful speckled yarn. I'm not sure how easy it is to tell all of the different colors that are in here. Yellow and red definitely being the primary ones, but there are some speckles of green. There's some blue. So it's definitely a fun surprise knitting this up. And my favorite thing ever is when I am knitting up and I come upon a string of a bunch of colors. My ball is a huge mess right now. It's just falling apart. But for example, when you're knitting and all of a sudden something like this pops up, I get really, really excited to have another pop of color added into the sweater. So it's definitely fun knitting with a speckled yarn like this. It's my first time ever using a yarn that's colored like this. Only my second time ever using a hand-dyed yarn at all. So really, really excited and loving this. But yeah, my main issue and the main reason I kind of put a pause on this was that I was afraid, I keep forgetting I have a microphone on. I was afraid that this color was not going to complement my skin tone. But you know what? I think with the really dark hair, it does work. So I'm giving it a shot. I am going to have to really motivate myself to get this second sleeve knitted, but because it's just simple stockinette in the round and it's the only project that I have currently that is stockinette in the round, I think it will be kind of a nice break from some of the more textured knits I'm working on. And so hopefully it shouldn't take too much longer to finish this. One thing I will say is this pattern, of course, is extremely well written, easy to understand. It's a very simple construction, but it is explained very well. It's PetiteKnit. She knows what she's doing. But something that I did find kind of odd was the rate of decreases in the sleeves, or maybe not necessarily the rate of decreases, but the number of decreases. So I believe in the pattern, she tells you to do a certain number of decreases and then immediately go into the ribbing, which the ribbing on this sweater is intended to be a little bit longer than what I've done here. So that might explain the confusion I'm having, but essentially she tells you as soon as you finish doing the sleeve decreases to start the ribbing on the cuff. My sleeve decreases ended here. So this length was definitely not long enough for a sleeve for myself. And had I started knitting the ribbing here, I would have had ribbed cuffs that went up to like halfway through my forearm, which is not necessarily the look I'm going for. So what I did was, after finishing all of the decreases, I just knit around with no decreases at all until I hit my desired length. I used my Lumi pullover once again as sort of a template for how long I wanted these sleeves, because the sleeves on my Lumi are perfect. I don't think I've ever knit sleeves that fit me quite as well as those ones. So that is going to be the blueprint going forward. And then once I hit a length that I liked, I decided to start the ribbing. And then I think I did about 16 or 18 rounds of ribbing before binding off with a Italian bind off. So that was the only thing that I thought was a little bit strange, was that the ribbing would have been this long had I not done that little modification. But otherwise, great pattern. Again, another one that, you know, everyone and their mom has knit at this point. It's a super simple, basic pattern, and I think something like this lends itself really well to a hand-dyed or speckled or just any kind of interesting yarn, because the design of the sweater itself is not all that distracting and it allows the special yarn to really shine. So fingers crossed, we'll see. Hopefully I can have this done by, let's say, mid-March. I am really looking forward to wearing it, so I just need to be a little bit disciplined, because this little bit of sleeve that I was putting off for the last, I don't know, month really only took me like half a day. So this sleeve I can absolutely knit up in less than a week. So I'm gonna try. My next two whips are exciting because they are two whips that are brand new to the podcast. So one of them, this one that I have here, was one that was in my winter planning video and is something that I have been meaning to knit up for quite some time. Definitely not an impulsive cast on like the next one that I'll get into. But anyway, this is the Moby Sweater Man, once again by PetiteKnit. This is definitely a PetiteKnit heavy video today, so my apologies for that. You can't beat a PetiteKnit pattern sometimes, you know? So this is what I have so far. I'm knitting up this pattern for my husband. This will be the second PetiteKnit pattern I've made for him. I made him the Handsome sweater, I want to say about 2.5 years ago now, and it's a little bit small on him, I will say. I made the extra small based on his chest measurements, but he does have a bit of broader shoulders and is quite tall. So this time around, I am knitting him the small, and I think it will fit him a lot better. He always wears t-shirts under his knitwear anyway, so I'm sure it'll be fine. He is a super, super knit-worthy person. I mean, he's my husband, I'm biased, but he is also someone who has been owning and wearing hand knit wool sweaters, from various parts of the world for his whole adult life. When we went to Iceland together 8 years ago now, he purchased a really nice Icelandic hand knit color work yoke sweater. He has a couple of hand knit woolen sweaters from Ireland, one from a trip that his brother took, and one from a trip that we took together. Actually, also 8 years ago, it was on the same trip as the Iceland. So he is someone who can not only tolerate the feeling of, some maybe rustic wool on his skin, but also is very good at taking care of his wool garments. So, like I said, very, very knit-worthy. I know he will take excellent care of anything that I make for him. So I am knitting this up in Palette from Knit Picks. I am holding 2 strands together to get gauge because Palette is a fingering weight yarn. And this color is Hazelnut. And I think it's just such a unique, warm brown tone. I basically handed my phone to my husband on the webpage for Palette and told him, pick a color you like. He has knits in all different kinds of colors, mostly like natural wool sheep colors, but he wanted something in a brown. And they have a few options for brown, but I'm actually really happy with this one that he chose here. It's definitely a more unique brown, not like anything that he currently has. Definitely a warmer tone brown than a lot of the browns that he has. So I think this is knitting up really nicely so far. Of course, with blocking, this will relax quite a bit. I have knit a couple items now in Palette, one being a garment that I wear very regularly. So I know that this yarn definitely does soften up quite a bit when it is blocked. This is at a bit of a tighter gauge than the sweater I knit on Palette in the past, but I'm sure it won't be any different. So right now I am at the point where I have knit the first chart and completed the short row shaping for the back. Now I have to knit just straight across and down for, I believe, another, 20 to 30 rows before I then put those stitches on hold and pick up the shoulders. You'll notice that I have no tips on this cable because I needed them for my Monday sleeve. So I'm kind of going back and forth between these two. I do also have a set of fixed 4mm circulars that are on my excavation blanket right now. But because that's such a long-term whip and I haven't worked on it actively in quite a while, I think I may borrow those for this and then use my tips with my long cable for the sleeves of my Monday because I am doing that in Magic Loop. Anyway, this is something I can figure out myself later. But yeah, so not too much to say about this for now. This back panel was knit up in, I want to say, a day, maybe a day and a half. I actually casted this on at a friend's house watching the Super Bowl, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And when I got home later, I sadly realized that I had one fewer stitch than what I needed in this little lattice section here in the middle. I assume that at some point when I was doing the faux cables, instead of knitting two together and then knitting through the second loop, I just knitted two together, and that's where one of those stitches disappeared to. So because I was having a little bit of trouble figuring out where I'd lost that stitch, I basically ripped back from this point and started over completely. But now I'm past where I even was after I did that, so it's all good. I want to make sure that this sweater is going to be perfect. I didn't want to just fudge in an extra increase somewhere so that I would have the right number again, because I didn't really know what effect it would have on the overall crisscross diamond motif in the middle here. So it's worth it to go back and fix mistakes like that, I think. So yeah, not much else on this. I don't anticipate it being finished by this winter, at least, because my husband is a tall man. I know I'm gonna have to increase the sleeves, the sleeve length. So hopefully this is ready by the spring. And if not, he'll have it for next winter. So that is the Moby Sweater Man. The last whip I have here is another new one to the podcast, and it was definitely an impulsive cast on. I casted this on yesterday and was knitting on it while watching the SNL 50th anniversary special. And that is just a simple 2x2 ribbed scarf. This was heavily inspired by Marlene from PetiteKnits, who is also knitting up a 2x2 ribbed scarf in a brown color. This, I'm not following really any pattern, I'm just kind of freehanding it. It is, like I said, just 2x2 rib, and I am going to go until I run out of yarn. I did really love the idea of having a balaclava hood type situation, like I had mentioned before, to match my penny gloves. And that was something that I also considered creating with the yarn that I'm using for this. But ultimately, I only have one scarf that I actually use very regularly, and I really was in need of a bigger, fluffier, warm scarf. So I casted this on impulsively because it's not the kind of thing I know I'm going to be wanting to knit much later in the season. So I figured it's February, we're in a crazy snowstorm. Let me knit this on now. I'm inspired. So I casted it on, worked on it for, this is maybe like an hour of work. And yeah, it's going to be a long-term project because it's a long scarf, but I do ideally want to be able to wrap it around my neck twice and then have some ends left that I can maybe tie in a knot. This I will try to block out as long as possible. So I think I can do it. I have 5 balls of this yarn, so we'll see how far that takes me. But I think it'll be a versatile piece as well because it is a little bit wide, so I will be able to wrap it over my head if I want to, like a hood. Definitely open to knitting one of those really popular hood patterns in the upcoming seasons, but I just didn't have the right amount of yarn at the right weight to knit any of them. So a scarf is what it's going to be for now. I didn't even mention what yarn this is. This is the Knit Picks, once again, Wonderfluff in the color Espresso Heather that I had laying around in my stash. I have never actually knit anything with Wonderfluff before, but it is extremely, extremely soft. I am usually a lot better at researching this stuff before I sit down to film, so I am just going to do a voiceover over this part where I am incorrectly describing this yarn. The Knit Picks Wonderfluff is 70% baby alpaca, 7% merino wool, 23% nylon blend, and it is essentially a blown yarn. So the baby alpaca and merino fibers are blown into this lightweight nylon tube of sorts, mesh, and it creates sort of this really fluffy appearance to the yarn. Okay, back to the video. And it's, I think, listed at a bulky weight gauge, but because it is so stretchy and sort of fluffy. You can kind of get away with knitting this, I think, on a variety of different sizes of needles. If you hold it just like this, then it definitely looks a bit bulkier, but when you stretch it, it has more of what I would compare to maybe a DK weight. So hopefully that makes sense. But I just picked a needle size that I thought would be appropriate. These are 6mm needles, and I'm going to go until I can't go anymore. And hopefully it will be long enough to wrap it around myself a couple times. It'll be a great piece to also have at the office with me to just throw over my shoulders because it can get quite cold in there. So definitely something I'm looking forward to having, but not an urgent whip for me, I would say. I think this will just be kind of like a background when I need something really quick to knit on, or even something that I can bring with me when I am taking public transportation or just going out somewhere and want something to do with my hands. So this is my impulsive accessory cast on. We'll see how far I get before inevitably it becomes summer and I get sick of knitting on a scarf. I don't have too many acquisitions this time around, but I do have one little thing that I picked up that I'm actually quite excited about. This is a supplement case from Sephora, and I was inspired by Woozy by Celine, who uses little supplement cases like this to store her knitting notions. So I actually don't have too much in here right now. This big section on the side here I'm just using for my barber cords. I've got some stitch markers in here and a tapestry needle in this one up here. A little one because my big ones don't fit in there, fortunately. And I am just keeping this in my project bag that I take with me whenever I'm bringing my knits out. And so far it has been really convenient. I have other little tins and containers that I do keep some notions in that I keep next to my couch over here in my box of whips. But it is handy to just have a few that are kind of on me at all times. If I'm knitting in a different room of the house, I can easily access them in here. And yeah, so shout out to Woozy by Celine because this is an excellent idea. And I think this was maybe $5 or $6 at Sephora that I just kind of tacked on to my order that I was already placing. So a really cool little tip if you're looking for a way to store your notions that is portable and convenient. As for future plans, I think I have my hands pretty full for the moment with these 4 whips, but I'm hoping that the Monday sweater and the Stornoway sweater are going to be finished before spring. So I'm doing a little bit of preemptive spring planning, thinking ahead. And one of those things that I would love to knit that was in my 2025 intentions video is to make myself a cardigan. I've only knit myself, I believe, well, I think I've knit myself about 4 or 5 cardigans in total since I've started knitting, but there's only one that I really do wear anymore. I had a couple that I knitted from old We Are Knitters kits that I don't even have anymore. I have some that were knit up at a super chunky gauge that are just not really my style anymore. So the Good Grandpa cardigan by Kadri is the only one that I do sort of actively reach for. And cardigans are so versatile that I definitely would be beneficial for me to have at least one more in my wardrobe, ideally more than that. So one of the plans that I'd had for this year was to knit up just a staple cardigan that I can bring with me places. I can throw on over almost anything that I'm wearing and just have it be a really convenient transitional piece in my wardrobe. So I have a sweater quantity of Peer Gynt in the shade Spiced Apple that I am planning on using for a cardigan. Definitely not the most versatile and basic color I could have chosen for the cardigan, but I love this color. I've had my eye on this color forever. And this will actually be my first time knitting with Peer Gynt, so I'm really excited to give it a go. It does definitely feel a little bit rougher, but I can definitely compare it to something like what I'm knitting up my Stornoway in, the Wool of the Andes by Knit Picks. Definitely has the same kind of feel. And I know that this one softens up a lot with blocking, and I've only heard amazing things about Peer Gynt, so I really, really am excited to work with this yarn. This will very likely be my next cast on once I've cleared a couple of projects off my needles. I just very, very recently booked a trip for late May, early June to the south of France. My brother in law and his family live there, and we tend to try going and visiting at least once a year. So we are going in May, June to go visit them. Really, really excited. They live in the south of France, so it's just gorgeous and super warm most of the time. But they're also quite close to the beach, and so we spend evenings at the beach occasionally, and it gets very, very windy and actually quite cold there. We've only visited them in October in the last few years, so I think May, June should be a little bit warmer. But all that said, it's never bad to have an extra cardigan on you if you need to throw something on really quick. A great layering piece. So while I want this for my everyday life, I think that that trip is going to kind of be a finish line marker, I guess, for when I would ideally like to have this project done, because I know that it'll be a great item to bring with me. Maybe I just wear it on the plane and never touch it again, but I think it will be a versatile item to have. So as far as plans go, that is definitely my next one. Editing me here, I totally forgot to discuss which patterns I'm considering for this cardigan. So essentially, I am right now in between the Eva cardigan by PetiteKnit and the Paul cardigan by Mokhtari. These are two fairly similar designs. They are V-neck cardigans with all over stockinette stitch. Both have saddle shoulders. The main differences being that the Mokhtari design has a little bit of a curved detail on the back panel near the shoulders, as well as a double knit button band, whereas the PetiteKnit design has a 2x2 rib all around the body. So I would maybe even do a double knit button band on the Ava cardigan if that was the one I chose, but still very much undecided. So if any of you have a preference toward one, or maybe you've knit one or the other and have any strong opinions, or like it, dislike it, whatever, definitely open to suggestions on that one. So please let me know below if you think I should knit one of those or maybe a completely different stockinette cardigan. I am still very much undecided, so that would be super helpful. Thank you. And while it's not an acquisition yet, because I have not yet acquired it, I have placed an order for some very exciting yarn. I had a goal that I mentioned in my 2025 intentions video that when I had hit a certain amount of revenue in my YouTube AdSense account, that I would treat myself to a nice yarn purchase from Knitting for Olive for yarn to knit up the Dagmar jacket by, say it with me, PetiteKnit. And I hit that amount quicker than I had expected to, I think. Definitely still new to the world of YouTube, so I was very pleasantly surprised to see that, people are excited to watch my videos, and as a result, I make a little bit of money from YouTube AdSense. So all that said, I ordered directly from the Knitting for Olive website. I ordered some heavy merino and some mohair, both new to me yarns. I've used the merino and cotton merino in the past from Knitting for Olive, but I've never used the heavy merino or the mohair. So I know the mohair is very soft and very well loved. I've touched it and seen it quite a bit at my local yarn store. I've just never purchased it and used it myself. So that is something I'm really, really excited for. Hopefully that arrives this week or next week. And that's a project that I also want to cast on fairly soon because I know I want to have that jacket ready to wear by the time fall rolls around. So it'll be something that I'm probably casually knitting on throughout the summer, but I think it wouldn't hurt to get a head start in the winter, springtime. So that is another sort of future plan that I'm really excited for, and hopefully by the next time I film an episode, I will have received that shipment. So I can't wait to share the whole process of knitting that up. All right, that is all I have for this episode of the podcast. I definitely am excited about a lot of the whips that I have on my needles right now, so I'm definitely in a period of feeling really motivated to knit and excited to knit, and I've just been trucking along at some of these projects. So needless to say, I'm excited to be able to wear these items, be able to share them. I tend to update fairly regularly about my projects on Instagram. So if you're not yet following me, my handle is amw.knits. Same as what I have here on YouTube, just with the dot in between. And you can see kind of some more frequent updates about my projects over there. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into this video. If you're not already subscribed, I would love to have you, and I will see you all in the next video.